Hey squad, Sykes here and welcome back to another Halo Infinite news video here on InstallationX. I hope you are well. And today we're going to be breaking down some of the key points from the recent outcomes from the technical preview that 343 have posted over on Halo Waypoint. It's basically a big summary article around all the feedback that they've had from the community and things that they plan on implementing for the next flight, which sounds like it's not going to be too far away, which is really good. For launch and things that they're going to look at implementing post-launch. Now, it is quite a long article, so I will leave everything linked in the description below, but I'm going to summarize the key thoughts here and the key points and kind of give my own opinions on a couple of things. So it was very comprehensive, which is very good, which means the community hopefully did the right thing in giving feedback the right way, but lots of different areas to go through. So first up, they talked about accessibility. So one of the feedback points that they talked about was people wanting an auto sprint option, so they didn't have to hold the thumbstick forward, which can be painful and difficult for some people if you're sprinting for long distances. The other one was around colours of the damage system colour and the mark system having their own colours, or having their own colour options compared to the friend or foe system. So that's something that they agree upon and they really like the suggestion, and they won't be able to get them in for launch, but it's something that they are planning on releasing post-launch. With audio, they noticed how everyone was loving the music, the menu music in particular, which is great because it is awesome. But then they talked a little bit more about the feedback that they had around certain weapon sounds, which is something that I definitely picked up personally. So they were talking about players wanting a more crystallized and glassy feel of the Needler. That's something that I definitely wanted because I felt that the Needler's sound wasn't actually that great at all. I thought it was very lackluster. And they are going to look at iterating on the sound design for the Needler and for the plasma pistol's primary fire. So the charge fire sound was perfect, but the primary fire itself wasn't as good as people were expecting to be or wanting it to be. And they're looking at also enhancing the gravity hammer sound as well. So apparently we are going to be getting in-progress versions of these in the next public flight. So they're looking to hear our thoughts around that when we get to play it again. Battle Pass and challenges. Now, this is an interesting one for me because if you watched my previous video, which I'll leave up above, I did go on a little bit of a rant last video talking about how I didn't feel that the challenge system is the way for Halo to move forward with its progression. I still don't. But they wanted to clarify a couple of things here. So apparently during the tech preview, there was a misconfiguration with the challenge offerings, which eventually prevented new challenges from popping up to players after they completed others. It's not intended, and it should be addressed by the next flight, so it looked like it's something they forgot to switch around or there was a bug. The other thing was around players requesting to earn XP per match outside of challenges, as well as having XP boost timers only count down while in a match, which it sounds a little bit dodgy if your XP boost is not stopping between matches. Like, if you're going to get an XP boost for a match, it should be happening during the actual game, but apparently it wasn't. I didn't really mess around with them too much. So apparently the daily challenges model is going to provide challenges along the lines of play X number of games to complete that challenge and earn XP towards the battle pass, and apparently they'll repeat throughout the day. And they're repeated and they're swapped out after completion to provide regular XP drops for the battle pass just by playing the games. And then they talked about weekly challenges are going to be more specific, so they're going to be around such as get 10 kills with a battle rifle. Apparently a significantly greater depth with the weekly challenges than you saw in the preview. That they'll go through in future. As for XP boost timers counting down while out of a match, we'll be looking at improving this experience post-launch, which I find interesting. And they also talked about how that progression is an area that will continue to improve and grow over time, and they'll have more to share later this month. I'm glad that they're coming forward and they're talking about this, but I'm still not sold on it at all. I want to see this really live and in practice, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to show us that before the game launches. Because, again, I have no problem with challenges being in the game as a supplement to some kind of other form of progression. I don't like the idea of my battle pass and challenges being the only form of progression. So, an example, again, like I used with Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves now has the reputation that you earn through the trading companies by selling loot and selling items, but then they also have the renown system now that you progress by essentially just playing the game, which goes towards the season pass or your plunder pass, which has the 1 to 100 tiers. So I'm getting progression through both systems simultaneously. I'm ranking up with my trading companies to get to level 75 or Athena 20 or whatever, and then I'm also ranking up to get to 100 renown for the battle pass or the season pass. So that I'm fine with, because I'm being rewarded in multiple ways, and I'm not being forced to complete challenges to progress through the trading companies. So I'm not sold on this at the moment, but again, we will just have to wait and see. Bots and bots arena. So there's a lot of feedback around bots. I actually thought they were surprisingly really, really good. But there was a couple of things that they were looking at. So one of the big points that I got a little bit annoyed with after a while was about their perfectly timed grenades and the ridiculous rapid fire on the sidekick. So apparently they're toning back the perfectly placed grenades or bounces at lower difficulty levels, and they're also looking into tweaking the gunfire accuracy a little bit, but they said not too far to avoid making the bots too easy, which I think is perfectly fair. They talked about the initial routes of the bots from the spawn, from the start of the game. So what we were seeing is all 4 bots follow exactly the same path. So I think it was on, was it Livewire? Basically all the 4 bots just literally came round that first corner. So you could literally throw a load of grenades in and you just wipe out the entire squad of bots straight away. So apparently that's, they're adding in some extra logic, which will help to break those things up, and they'll perform more like a squad, which is really cool. Although they didn't necessarily say what timeline that's going to be. Apparently they're working on making bots more effective with equipment, and they're trying to get as close to as possible replicating the player action with the tools and in the sandbox, which is good. They talked about how some bots were getting confused and stopping mid-combat, which again is something that I didn't experience very much, but apparently these were bugs, and they're going to be hopefully fixed and iron out before launch and over the coming months. And then there was a player request for having more difficult bots than Spartan bots. So they were definitely tuned off or tuned down a little bit for the flight, but they're recommending that people understand that they're not esports pros. They're not intended to be esports pros. They're intended to be a tool to help players warm up, practice their skills, and to teach new players. So it's something that they are keeping a mind eye with, essentially. Then we got weapon drills. So there was feedback around wanting improved teaching about alt fire modes for certain weapons, which they agree upon. That is apparently going to be a post-launch feature, and they're investigating options to better explain the nuances of each weapon in the weapon drill. So it'll be things like having alt fire for the heat wave, or having alt fire for the plasma pistol, and so forth. There was a lot of feedback around swapping between different weapons whilst in the actual drill instead of having to come out of it. They're trying to look at reducing that friction, but again, that looks like it's going to be something post-launch. Untimed weapon drills, yep, apparently that's already in the post-launch list as well. Drills for equipment and movement, again, this is also going to be post-launch. We're plotting various drills for a lot of other mechanics such as grenades, melee weapons, equipment, and vehicles. I find this one interesting because, for me, the whole point of the academy is to help A, practice your skills, and B, to teach new players. And I would like to think that you want to get that kind of those habits and those teachings in very early doors to get players in, and B, keep them there. So the idea that a lot of this teaching, these teaching tools for new players, is going to be coming post-launch, I find a little interesting. But we'll have to wait and see. The combat sensor. So this one was an interesting one. I wasn't really too bothered about the combat sensor, but I know a lot of people were. So apparently the combat sensor was only displaying enemies when they were sprinting or they were shooting. This has apparently now been updated, so that the combat sensor will feel more like a motion tracker of old, which shows all movement besides crouch walking. And they should have that ready by the next flight. They haven't committed to that, but they're aiming for that. Again, this is something that I was overly fussed about, but I get why people may have been, so that's okay. There was a lot of feedback around personal AI. A lot of it was really positive. I loved the personal AI. I thought they were awesome. But apparently there's calls for getting more customization for the personal AI. It's always good to have more customization, which is something that they're definitely looking into, such as the course shapes, the hats, props, all that etc. stuff, which will be funky and cool. They're planning on continuing to expand the roster of AI over time, and they have a few ready for launch that we haven't seen yet, which is fine. They agree about previewing a personal AI's voice and personality before you take them on the battlefield. this has already been working, or they've already been working on this, and this should be ready for the next flight, which is good. Apparently, one of the things that a lot of people raised as well was around the frequency of which personal AI were talking. I actually wasn't that bothered by it. I was more bothered by Spartan talk. That over yonder line was just going off all the time. It was just like, oh, please shut up. I've never really been that bothered by Spartan chat at all. I don't really think it adds much to the experience, and I don't think it really adds much to the gameplay either. But apparently, they've already made adjustments to this to reduce the frequency and the repetition of certain lines, which should be ready for the next flight. And apparently, a lot of people spoke about having a level of control with the volumes of personal AI and other things as well. So it's something that they're looking into in the future as well. And they're also looking about how they give the frequency of certain lines as well. To try and just say your personal AI can be there, but very, very, very in the background, or your personal AI can be there and very in the foreground, talking to you quite a lot. So they're looking into that as well. Then we get to the thing that this is the one thing that really held my experience up quite a lot in the tech preview, where it kept bugging me and I kept noticing it and I wasn't really happy with it. And that was medals. So there was a lot of focus around the size, placement, and the art style of the medals. I've never been someone who's been overly attached to a certain art style of a certain particular game. I'm one of these Halo fans who recognises that the Halo games will change from iteration to iteration, and that actually I think you should allow 343 to have a little bit of creative freedom to try new things. I've never been this hardcore on it. Halo should be this, Halo should be that. But one of the things that makes Halo really special to me as a multiplayer and as so unique compared to other games is its medals and how you are rewarded and how things are shouted out by the announcer in the game. So having like these tiny medals that look very uninspiring, like just off the center left of your screen, it felt like a real downgrade to what we've had before. So work has been done, and hopefully you'll be able to see the image on the screen now, to kind of change the art style and the iconography of some of the medals that we've seen here. Obviously, a lot of the focus has been around making them bigger, making them feel more metallic. Some people are still a bit hung up around the colours. I'm not too bothered. I think this is a good step in the right direction, and obviously they're not going to be able to get it all done for launch straight away after there was a lot of feedback around it, but they are working on it, which is great. They are apparently doing a revision which preserves the difficulty tiering, or the colours and the iconography, but says it nudges the visual treatment towards a more classic Halo skeuomorphic medal design. You may not see the metified medals in the next flight, but we're pushing to get them in for launch, which is good to hear, because I think this is something that was just pulling me out of the experience more than I was expecting it to, so I'm glad that they were fixing this, and they're on the way to fixing it. Friend or foe recognition, this is something that I wasn't overly fussed with, but I understand the points that other people were making around it. It's difficult to distinguish when someone's shields were down because the friend or foe colours were popping so much, and I do understand it. So apparently there's been significant FX changes to better communicate the health of a target. So you should know if you're fighting a player who has an overshield, full shields, weakened shields, or broken shields now, which is good, and that should be ready for the next flight, which is also great. As for more options, such as turning outlines off entirely, they need to explore how realistic this is given the timeline for launch. So I don't expect that to be in for launch, but we're always in favour of providing more options to our players, but it's very likely we won't be able to provide these until after launch. I'm perfectly fine with that as long as they're recognising that it's something they can alter in the future, which is really cool. Apparently, a big thing was about people's gamer tags and service tags not popping above people's heads. I completely blanked on this. I didn't even notice it at all. But apparently this was a bug and it's been fixed, which is cool. Aiming. So a lot of the focus on aiming was around a couple of weapons in particular, the sniper and the skewer, which we'll get to in a second. But what they've done is they've increased the default sensitivities for both mouse and keyboard and controllers, including while zoomed in on weapons with 5 times scopes and above, which is good, because hopefully that will rectify some of the aiming issues around those higher end, higher scoped weapons like the sniper and the skewer. Apparently they've exposed actual dead zones controls in the settings. I don't really know much about dead zones. I do need to read up on them a bit more about how they work and the functionality of them. I haven't really messed around with them before, but that's there for those people who care, and that should be ready for the next flight. So apparently a lot of people were asking around what's going on with the zoom function. So people were asking whether the weapons aiming traits or increase its effectiveness at range, similar to Halo 5 Smart Scope. So apparently in Halo Infinite, this is not the case. So if it's an unscoped weapon and you're just zooming in on it, it's just going to give you a reduced field of view instead of an improvement on the aiming. So the direct quote here is that scoped weapons will have benefits due to their scopes, but unscoped weapons will perform the same regardless of its zoom state. Players will see a decrease in FOV, but there is no underlying change in these weapons when zoomed in. I really like that. Good shout. Weapons, there was a main focus around weapons was around the sniper and the skewer and a little bit with the gravity hammer. So one of the things that they're going to do is they are going to look at doing some tuning changes to the aiming of the S7 sniper for the next flight. I'm not sure about whether they're doing anything specific about the skewer because they didn't mention it. But we can imagine if they're going to alter something with the sniper, it's likely they might alter something with the skewer as well, because they are very similar, even though they shoot and they look different. The other thing was around the gravity hammer, and they noticed that the gravity hammer was getting a lot of attention. They said that the overall feedback on this was pretty split, where people were saying that they were happy that it wasn't just another sword, but others felt that the change made it too slow. I do feel like, compared to other gravity hammers, that this really is very, very different in terms of how the wind up for the gravity hammer is a lot more extended to what we're used to. So it may just be a change that is worth spending a bit more time with, but equally I kind of get people's points on it. So they say because it's split down the middle, they're not really touching the gravity hammer at the moment. They're just intending on monitoring it for the future. Movement, they were really happy with the feedback they got around sprint, which is really good. I thought sprint was perfect. I think, there's always going to be a debate about sprint in Halo, but I felt if you're going to do sprint in Halo, this is the perfect way to do it. So they nailed it, in my opinion. They did say that there was some people who were experiencing warping during online matches. I don't really know what that means, but I'm assuming that's around lagging or having issues with controls. They're looking at they're constantly improving their network model to reduce warping, and we'll continue to listen to feedback around that. And apparently there were some people who were experiencing screen shake even when the settings were down to 0. Apparently that was a bug and it's now been fixed and ready for the next flight. Equipment, they made a focus on one of my big points from the tech preview, which was the drop wall. So the drop wall's timing, I felt, was far too long, and it was taking so long to deploy that by the time you tried to use it, you could already be dead before it even pops. So one of the things that they were looking at doing with the drop wall was the intent behind the delay was to make it a piece of equipment that you use proactively when preparing for an engagement rather than reactive once the fight has already broken out. Now, the one thing I will say to that is Halo can go so quick sometimes that being proactive may just mean I drop my drop wall now in the hope that someone comes around the corner and I've got a little bit of protection. I don't want it to be as powerful as a bubble shield because I felt sometimes the bubble shield would kill the fight, but I would like it to be quick so that if I am suddenly in a 2v1 situation and I've got the drop wall, I should be rewarded for having that piece of equipment in that I can get it out quickly and give myself a second to settle and then start the fight. That's something that I would like to see. They also didn't make it as durable as something like a bubble shield because they didn't want it to stop a fight. They just wanted to be a wrinkle in the fight and not to manufacture a full stop to the combat loop, which I do agree with. So apparently what they've done is they've reduced the drop wall's deployment time ready for the next flight, so I'm interested to see how that goes. They're taking a closer look at durability, but want to assess how the fast deployment impacts the gameplay before committing to changing its health of the panels. So I get that, that's fine. The Huds, apparently, there was a lot of comments about the HUD. Now, this was one of the things where I don't usually watch a lot of other YouTubers or people that I follow before I make a video. I like going in video like straight to my point and then kind of reviewing whether my opinion falls in line with other people's. And when I was doing a little bit more watching of other videos, I was seeing that a lot of people were making a big point about the HUD, about how it was really small, how they don't understand why we moved away from a classic HUD in the first place, about having, your weapons in the top right, your grenades in the top left, and having your motion tracker down the bottom left, and then having the score down in the bottom right. And I was like, actually, that is a fair point, which I didn't really touch on. So apparently they agree that they want to make improvements to how the weapon cradle was showing it, but they felt it was too small and they want to increase the size of that. There was also feedback around not being able to see your secondary grenade type, because that was in apparently a sub-menu, which was very weird. So they agree that they want to change that up, and that's going to happen in a future update. Now, they say future update here, so whether that means it's going to be after the flight but before launch, or whether it's going to be after launch but not as a season update, more as like a quality of life update, they didn't really commit to when that may happen. And the other thing that they said, that the feedback was they saw lots of fan mock-ups, and they agree about HUD customization options down the road, but again, that's something that isn't going to happen anytime soon, and that's something that we're going to see post-launch as they look to update the game as the game evolves. And then the last thing around menus, I wasn't overly bothered around this, to be honest. I'm not that fussed about menus. It's something I don't really care about, but others do. So apparently there were some bugs impacting menus, such as not always equipping items, and they recognise that there's room for improvement of the overall customization and presentation and the layout. So while the current layout is what we will see at launch, it will continue to evolve with each season. So they're not directly committing to anything, but I think a lot of this is going to be down to giving players as much choice as they can. So yeah, I think that was a pretty comprehensive update from 343 to their credit. I'm glad to see that they're already improving on stuff for the next flight. We're going to get a fair amount of stuff changed for the launch, and then hopefully just quality of life insurance or changes, allowing more customization for players to model the experience of how they would like it. And yeah, I felt they've done a better job. I don't think they've done a fully great job. There's still things that I want a bit more explaining to. But I thought they've done a very good job about how they are being transparent with the community and opening up about the things that they've been given and what they're going to do about it. So overall, thumbs up. Well, squad, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please make sure you leave a like, you head over to InstallationX and subscribe, and you hit that bell for notifications for future uploads. Let me know your thoughts on all these changes that will be coming to Halo Infinite either now or at some point in the future in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow myself and the channel on social media with links in the description. And as always, I'm Sykes, and for all things Halo Infinite and all things Xbox, stay tuned to InstallationX. Bye, guys.